You are listening to Salty Believer Unscripted, a conversation on Christian ministry and the Christian life. This is Salty Believer Unscripted. I'm Bryan Catherman. Josiah is out graduating. Woohoo for Josiah. But I decided since he was going to Gateway to graduate, I would take somebody from Gateway to take his place. So on the podcast, I don't know if I should make it some kind of secret surprise and we should have people guess, or we should just go with who you are. Mark, should we just go? I have Mark Bradley, Dr. Bradley, from Gateway Seminary. Mark, say hello and tell us a little bit about kind of what you do at the school and who you are.
Sure, Bryan. Good to be with you today. I'm the director of the Pacific Northwest campus of Gateway Seminary. Gateway has 5 physical campuses, so I'm the director of our campus in Vancouver, Washington, not BC, and not Washington, D.C. So we're Vancouver, not BC, Washington, not D.C. here. And our headquarters for our campus is in the Northwest Baptist Convention's headquarters. They make room for us, provide that for us, and also support us in their budget. So we couldn't exist without their help. And so we're, officially tied to the seminary, but also have a strong connection to the Northwest Baptist Convention.
A little plug for them, a little advertisement plug.
Yeah,
right?
I gotta give them some kudos because they help pay the bills around here. And so our campus is the smallest of the 5 physical campuses, which kind of fits with our SBC demography in the Northwest. We have fewer churches in the Northwest than places like Arizona and certainly California. But I'm a graduate of this campus myself.
That particular campus?
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I graduated. I mean, it wasn't in this location at the time, but this entity, it was then called the Northwest Center of Golden Gate Seminary. I graduated with my MDiv in 1985 and then went to work on my PhD because I felt called to come back and teach at this entity. And that didn't happen as quickly as I initially imagined. I went and pastored in a university town in Pullman, Washington for 17 and a half years. And then by then I was a little more mature and experienced and the directorship opened up. So instead of becoming a professor, I came to be the director and been in this role for 14 years now.
Are you from that area? Are you from the Washington, Oregon area? Is that?
Yes. I was born in Oregon City, Oregon, for lack of a hospital, in West Lynn, Oregon, where I grew up. Those are small cities that are just across the river from each other, and had a very stable childhood. I came home from the hospital to the house that I left from to go to college. So,
oh wow,
yeah.
But so you like that is your pocket of the world, man.
Yeah. I'm Northwest born and raised, and didn't get saved till just after high school, and I was saved on the road to Damascus.
Literally, because it's Damascus. I mean, our listeners probably don't know there's a Damascus, Oregon, right?
Damascus, Oregon. Yeah, I was saved on the road to Damascus, Oregon, on the way to work one day, and it was a very charismatic kind of experience. I had a very experiential baptism of the Holy Spirit at the moment of my conversion, and thought that was normative for all Christians for some time until I was telling somebody about it. When you just get this worrying sensation in your brain and you feel this high throughout your extremities and everything else, and they go,
what are you talking about?
It's like, what, you don't have that? It's like, no, man, that's like something special God did for you because you were so far gone. I was an atheist, an outspoken atheist in high school, and God had to kind of reach a little extra deep, with the pixie dust or whatever to get me in. And so, he spoke to me in a language that morning that I understood, which was getting high, as I had abused alcohol and marijuana to some extent, mostly alcohol in high school as an atheist. And so when I had that high sensation on the road on the way to work that day, I knew unmistakably that was God's answer to my prayer. I'd been witnessed to quite a bit, was really engaged and actually seeking it, and was even asking God, what do I do? I want in. It's like I'd gone through an intellectual stage of faith and an emotional stage of faith, and I just was lacking the volitional stage of how do we close the deal? And in the midst of literally in the midst of praying that kind of thing, the Lord just gave me this baptism of the Holy Spirit that was so experiential. I'd been drunk a number of times, been high on pot another times, and never did LSD, so I knew it wasn't a feedback. What do you call it?
Hallucination or something,
Yeah, hallucination, or what is it when you have
flashback or something.
flashback? It wasn't like a flashback thing of a high, and it was in the context of me adoring Jesus while I'm singing some soft rock songs that were written to girls, and the whole context was me adoring Jesus and wanting in, knock on the door, and that high came upon me, and I knew that was God's answer. And so anyway, that's my unusual.
Mark,
Wow,
when we have
we
people
breezed
on
right through
from
that. You got some questions for me? I
well,
better stop
when we
giving my
have
testimony.
when we have people on from the Bible Belt, we don't usually have those stories. So I guess Oregon, Washington sort of
Yeah.
contributes a little bit to this. Hey, so I probably should let people know we were on a doctoral committee together for
Mhm.
a candidate, which was my first time doing that, kind of an up and down experience. And that's where our connection comes from, because people go, wait, we sent Josiah and we just grabbed a random guy. No, that was it was really enjoyable. The other thing too is I've edited a number of those candidates' papers, and a couple of them, one of them for sure, you were like the committee chair on that. And so I got to just sort of see that. But here's why I'm reaching out to you. And I think you can maybe help me. In my context, and as a pastor, and as in a mission field area, I mean, in Utah is where I'm at, but you're in a mission field area as well. In a context like this, there are people looking to church planting. They're looking at pastorless churches, which we have a few out here, and there's some rural towns and big towns, and there's just this whole process. And what seems to be creeping in the language, at least since the pandemic and since 2021, is statements like these. I'll share them. I want to see if you can maybe affirm them or not from your observation, being in a seminary. The statements are: people don't want to go into ministry as much anymore. The pipelines are drying up. The world's too complex now, and there's too much fear that people will lose their jobs. And so we can anticipate the future ministers of the church just not like we've once seen at all. I mean, just that kind of sky is falling for the church sort of context. I recognize you don't represent every seminary on the planet. You're in a very unique pocket. But if you, in quite frankly, a very liberal corner of the country where that stuff would be very, very real. I mean, that's actually probably all up and down the coast for Gateway anyway.
Right.
You're facing that a lot more than people maybe in the Midwest or in the Bible Belt or whatever. So I want to ask you about your observations. Are these statements, do you see this as being true? Are you guys struggling? No, you don't have any students at your site. I mean, what do you see? Do you see this to be true, or is this maybe just hyperbole we should ignore?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I feel a little mixed about it. I mean, we're always concerned, and if we're missional, we always want to be, we need more. We always need more pastors, more, the harvest is the fields are white for harvest, and we need more. We need to beseech the Lord to send out more workers into the harvest. And
I want that too. I want that too.
Of
I mean,
course,
very much
yes.
so.
Yeah, and that's one of my main responsibilities, is to recruit students. So I'm always looking for students and get out and preach a good bit, and hoping to meet emerging ministers who are in seminary. I mean, some of the things that are somewhat true about the negativity that you're hearing are that our culture is increasingly secular, increasingly liberal, and respect
maybe hostile to Christian, hostile to churches, ministers.
Yes, hostile to churches, hostile to Christians in general. I mean, gosh, 2 generations ago, Christians were kind of recognized as moral people, and ministers were respected and everything. And now Christians are like the immoral, haters of gays or whatever, and so that's a negative thing.
If you want to live a radical lifestyle that's anti-society, be a Christian. I mean, who would have thunk?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we used to be a little more mainstream and respected, and now there's definitely more of a cost to count to be an outspoken Christian, because it is more countercultural. And
so is that chasing the students away, do you think, or do you see that it's not? I mean, what do you think? How are students responding to that?
Well, I think that it probably is applying a filter, that the timid would be minister is maybe getting filtered out because he's anticipating he won't be able to stand the heat in the kitchen, but it's not filtering out everybody. I mean, we got plenty of believers that see the trend and doggone it, God's bigger than all that, and I feel called and train me up as I'm going to wade in there and
So
get
they're
into
going
the
for
fray.
it.
So
Do you think, not to pass judgment on previous classes, I would have been among those previous classes years ago.
uh-huh.
Do you think just as a whole, that's producing maybe a stronger, maybe more passionate, more resilient type graduate opposed to maybe before?
Yeah, I think that is the case certainly for some of our students. I would acknowledge that we just have some generational trends where we probably have some students who are just coming out a little bit more moderate in their philosophy than would have been typically the case in the 1950s or whatever.
That's
I mean,
fair.
so
I mean,
some
that's fair.
generational trends there. Not all that's bad. I mean, you can
It's
be
crazy. I don't mean to
doing
make both
things.
of us feel old, but if when we look at the church in the 1950s, we're talking about 70 years ago.
I know.
I
I
mean
know.
I mean there is a pretty big gap there.
Right. I was born in 1959, so so I'm kind of, I wasn't aware of anything personally in the 50s, but I was on the
But
planet.
still, we can't. It's hard to just compare that crop of students to a crop of students 70 years separated from
Yes. Yeah,
that.
it's
So
really,
okay, so let's talk about these students. Like, first of all, is
yeah.
your enrollment way down, or you feel like it's way down, kind of down? Is it up? Is it where do you feel like you're at for where you're
So
at?
our enrollment at our campus is just kind of steady for the whole time I've been here. I mean, when I
And
first,
you've been there for a pandemic. So even
yeah,
even with the pandemic, would you say it's kind of rounded back out? So still steady.
yeah, yes, I think
That's
so. Well,
encouraging.
in fact, during the pandemic, people couldn't go anywhere, but they got a bunch of federal aid and they spent it on tuition and hunkered down and studied some books. So, our enrollment actually hung in there pretty nicely during the pandemic. So
Well,
I don't feel
Josiah
that
was one
way.
of those. I mean, Josiah on the podcast, he's
Yeah,
been at it for 3 years, and
yeah,
and he said, hey, what better time? I mean,
yeah. You can't go
he-
socialize and you got some extra money, might as well take some classes.
yep,
Yeah,
yep.
right. And we've got pockets of really strong church planning networks and lead churches that are trying to multiply that are really encouraging. The Resonate Church Planning Network came out of Pullman actually, and it's a collegiate church planning network that they're on like 16 different cities across the West now.
Yeah. Are they
Uh,
generating students? Are you seeing students coming out of that?
yeah, they're generating some students, not as many as I'd like, but it's
Well, are
always
you
gonna be
ever
my
gonna
answer, right?
are you ever gonna be okay with like if your job is to recruit, it's gonna be
Exactly,
more,
right.
right? More.
Yeah. Did you have as many baptisms as you hoped last year?
No, I want more. Yeah,
Yeah, you want
exactly.
more,
I
right?
want more. I want more.
Yeah.
So okay. Obviously where you are at is gonna play into this a lot more. I almost feel like in some ways, our Atlantic Northeast, our Pacific Northwest, actually our whole Pacific coast,
Mhm.
kind of has a sense of the canary in the mine. Now, I'm hesitant to say that when it comes to California churches, because I'm in Utah and there are plenty of other states that are like shocked when they figure out how many big churches and how many. I mean, there's a lot of big
Mhm.
churches and a lot of Christianity and a lot of small churches in California. But
Mhm.
I recently did some sabbatical time in Oregon, and I'm familiar with some of that stuff in Washington. I mean, that's a little more, probably more appropriate to look to the future. So
Mhm.
in the pockets where you're at, where Christianity is even more difficult, like I said, canary in the mine might be the best way to think about your site.
Mhm.
What do you see in the future? What do you see coming down the line that maybe, first of all, let's do it in two ways. What do you think we should be aware of to, kind of a warning, if you will, but
Mhm.
where can we be encouraged? I mean, I'd like to hear kind of from both those perspectives.
Yeah, good. Well, it's interesting you use the canary in the mine analogy, because there was a time several years ago during my tenure of leading this campus that President Orge kind of framed us as that for the other regional campuses, because our regional campus was begun in 1980, and then Arizona and Rocky Mountain started in somewhere early to mid 90s. And so we're quite a ways ahead of them. And we were starting to have some headwinds here. And then the Northwest Convention, who's been our generous benefactor all along, have given us a place to meet and have given us budget money. They had financial pressures because of NAM's diminishing support. And
so some of our listeners are, so we're talking Southern Baptist circles, Gateway Seminary, formerly Golden Gate Baptist Theological. So it was Golden Gate,
yes, yes.
Gateway Seminary, they had a name change. We're talking in those circles. So NAM would be the North American Mission Board.
Right.
Just to kind of put some.
Sure. If you've got some non-SBC listeners that are in the kingdom, we're glad to have them. And you need to explain those things. So the support from our state convention diminished some, and President Orge got concerned about, how the Pacific Northwest campus goes might be a harbinger of what's going to happen in Arizona and Rocky Mountain. And so he expressed pretty strong concern. And, we've hung in there since then. I mean, we adjusted to the budget issues, made some cuts that were probably overdue, and how we conceived of how we're doing some things, and lean on address a little harder.
When was this for?
That was I'm thinking that was about 2014 or so, something.
Okay, so
around
this
there.
wasn't like recent. I mean,
no, it wasn't like pandemic,
but
recent,
still same sort of thing, canary in the mine sort of thing. So
yes, and part of what President Orge was concerned about is that he wondered if it was kind of like an institutional age issue, that we'd been here since 1980. Had we kind of worked the field so thoroughly, we've got so many people that already have taken classes and gotten their degrees from us, that there's just not much of a market to work anymore. And
that might be the pipeline perceived issue too. We had a really high pressure full pipeline because we didn't have something, and now maybe that's shifted. Maybe, anyway, carry on. Sorry.
Right. And so, my perspective on that is that, that's a factor, but, we always have new churches happening. The Northwest Baptist Convention has got a higher rate of planting churches than any of the other 33 state conventions of the SBC. So per capita,
you started with so many towns with no SBC churches, so many places. I mean, you had a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. So we have over 500 SBC churches now in the Pacific Northwest, and there's more being planted every year, and they need ministers, and those ministers need some training, and we're here to give it to them. So in one way, we have kind of worked the field pretty thoroughly, but we're still growing market share of trying to reach people and everything. And there's always emerging leaders coming. So, I'm in recruiting mode right now. I was on a Zoom call for an hour and 15 minutes earlier this morning with an adult man. I think he's 42 years old, who's feeling called to ministry because his pastor actually is trying to call out the men of his church to come to grips with that. And he and his wife surprised me today. I thought the wife just wanted to be on to find out, how much you're going to take them away from me and my family, and how much this is going to cost. But actually, she wants to be a student as well. So it's well, pleasant surprise. I might get a couple of students.
Our conversation with Mark Bradley took more time than originally expected. Please find the conclusion of this discussion in a separate episode on SaltyBeliever.com.
Thanks for listening. Salty Believer Unscripted is a production of SaltyBeliever.com. Visit the website to find more resources like the podcast you've just listened to.